all are thought to have been detained across the country. Let's talk to James Denselow because he's a Syria specialist at King's College London. Good afternoon to you. Absolutely no sign of the Syrian authorities, whatever Hillary Clinton, whatever anyone else internationally might say, of fundamentally changing its tack, or fundamentally wanting to back down here.
Yes, certainly, and it's very difficult to take their word for what is happening on the ground. There's no journalists, there's no NGOs or aid workers allowed into these besieged cities, and I think we're at a really worrying turning point here. So far, the Arab awakenings across the region have been characterized by the victory of courage over fear. The fear of the security forces and the regimes are being replaced by the optimism that has filled the squares of Tahrir or the city of Dera. The fear is now being reimposed by the state in the most brutal form possible, sending out its own army against its people, snipers and what have you, and we're hearing from Syria some 600 killed. And with no outside intervention seemingly possible, what we're really hoping, I guess, if you're a Syrian protester, is that there will be defections within the armed forces themselves, like what happened in Egypt, who will abandon the regime and refuse to simply turn on their own people.
And the fact that we haven't had many, if any, defections, is that because those individuals themselves, anyone who might be interested in that, are themselves frightened, or actually is the hold and the authoritarian nature so strong there that there isn't that will?
Well, it's hard to tell exactly. There have been some rumours of fighting between the 4th and 5th Divisions that are currently based down around Dera. But remember, the 4th Division itself is commanded by President Assad's younger brother. So it shows you that a Praetorian Guard run by elite members of the same family will have, of course, strong loyalty to the regime itself. I think really now I'd be interested to see whether European pressure on Syria can result in perhaps changing people's minds at the top of the Syrian regime. Remember that Europe is responsible for about 20% of Syria's trade, some 5 billion euros, and therefore does have some economic sway if it can act as a unified body, something that it hadn't really done effectively, I would say, towards Libya, but potentially could do towards Syria.
You think some form of economic sanction is perhaps what, the only route? Because all we hear, as you're reflecting to some degree, is a continued authoritarian crackdown, tanks going in, almost any tactics prepared to be used against the protesters in various cities across the country. One wonders what economic sanctions, how much sway that could really have.
I think you're totally right. Syria is a pretty sanction-proof country, as history has shown, but that's not a reason why you shouldn't avoid trying for the best case. I mean, obviously on the other side of the scenario, more sanctions from the Europeans could force Syria back towards more traditional allies in Iran and Russia, which perhaps wouldn't do the West any good. But I think the big difference for me between Libya, Syria and Egypt was that the West did have connections and influence with Egypt that allowed it in a way to sort of be involved in the process of transition from Mubarak to the uncertainties ahead, whereas there is simply no contacts, no ability, no leverage for the West in Syria. So unless it chooses to dramatically escalate its liberal intervention theory, then it seems like it's bad news for the protesters there.
All right, well, many thanks. There's much more we could discuss, but perhaps we'll speak again on this. Thank you very much, James Denselow there from King's College London. And just to tell you that we will be talking to the